All right, well, welcome back to our series on the Universal Encyclopedia of Scales. In this series, we're gonna dive into the entire world of scales and show you how to get the most out of our Encyclopedia of Scales. If you haven't done so already, definitely check out the other episodes and catch up before diving into this one. I'll put a link in the description down below, or you can click on this iCard right here. So you were saying that there are scales with less modes than notes? Correct, there are scales with less modes than notes. We call these symmetric scales, or scales of limited transposition. Limited transpositions? Yeah, never mind that now. Do you remember earlier how we got all the related modes of a scale by using the circle of fifths? Yep. We did it with the major scale. We drew the graph over the circle of fifths using the notes in the scale, and then we rotated the graph together with the notes. And then every rotation of the graph gives us a different mode. C Ionian turns into G Mixolydian, then D Dorian, A Aeolian, E Phrygian, B Locrian, and then F Lydian. These are the 7 related modes of the major scale, or Ionian. Awesome, well done. Now let me show you another example. Let's use the Augmented Triad. Remember that even though it has only 3 notes and we call it a triad, we're going to consider it a scale with 3 notes. Using our definition of scale, we can say that the C augmented triad is C, E, and G sharp with C as the designated root. The intervallic formula for the augmented triad is then major third, major third, major third, because each note is a major third above the previous note in the scale. The graph over the circle of fifths is an equilateral triangle. As we've seen in the previous video, we can get the related modes by rotating the graphs around the circle of fifths. But look what happens when I rotate the graph around the circle. The graph doesn't change. That's right. No matter which way you turn the graph, it remains unchanged because the E moves to the top where the C was. The C moves to where the G sharp was, and the G sharp moves to where the E was. This graph presents symmetry under rotation, and that's why the scale it represents is called symmetric. Now it is clear that the scale has only one mode because the graphs we obtained under rotation are indistinguishable from one another. That's pretty cool. 3 notes and only one mode. So that's what a symmetric scale is, a scale with less modes than notes. And now that I've seen it in the circle of fifths, it's actually so obvious. I know, right? The cool thing is that when Hold on. You said that symmetric scales are also called scales of limited transpositions. Like I was saying, the cool thing is that when you take a symmetric scale and you transpose it into all 12 keys, you get less than 12 note groupings. Wait, that's absurd. There are 12 keys, therefore there are 12 transpositions of any scale. You can have a C augmented triad, a D flat augmented triad, and a D augmented... Hold on. Listen, this is the C augmented triad. The notes are C, E, and G sharp. Now, let's rotate the circle of fifths 12 times until we get back to C to get the augmented triad in all keys. So now we have the G augmented triad with the notes C, B, and D sharp. Then the D augmented triad, D, F sharp, and A sharp. Then the A augmented triad, A, C sharp, and F. Next is the E augmented triad with the notes E, G sharp, and C, which contains the same set of notes as the first set we started with. Then B, D sharp, G, with the exact same notes as in the second set. Then G flat, B flat, and D, same as the third set. Remember, these are pitch classes, so G flat is the same pitch class as F sharp, and B flat is the same as A sharp. And after we've gone through all keys, we only get 4 different sets. We can say that the augmented triad only has 4 transpositions. Okay, but there are still 12 possible augmented triads, 1 for each note. Well, we can still talk about 12 different augmented triads, but actually we can only distinguish between 4 of them. The C augmented triad, the E augmented triad, and the G sharp augmented triad are all defined by the same set of notes. And no matter which note you choose as the root, the graph remains unchanged. Another way of looking at this is that if you would stand on any of the notes and look at the graph from that note's perspective, the graph would look the same from all 3 points, which also implies that the notes and the intervallic formula look the same regardless of which of these notes we choose as the root. Nice. And now you're going to tell me, but there's more. Yep, and there's more. We now know that symmetric scales are scales with less modes than notes, and also scales of limited transpositions. But we can also predict how many transpositions a symmetric scale has if we know the amount of related modes it has, and vice versa, because the amount of transpositions is equal to 12 times the amount of modes divided by the amount of notes. So the augmented triads with 3 notes and only 1 mode will yield 4 possible transpositions. The diminished 7th with 4 notes and only 1 mode can only be transposed to 3 different keys. The half diminished scale, or the half whole scale, has 8 notes but only 2 modes. Therefore, it can only be transposed to 3 different keys. That's something I've never thought about. These symmetric scales are actually kind of cool. How many of these symmetric scales are there in music? Actually, there are 37 symmetric scales in music. But a better question to ask is how many symmetric source scales are there? And the answer is 15. Wait, source scales? I heard you use that term a few times already. What exactly is a source scale? A source scale is what we would call mode 1 of any set of related modes.